and the evidence base sort of emerged over the years as we were using it. But I can remember never being quite sure what to do with it.
No, you're right. The evidence base actually for efficacy is pretty reasonable, actually. I think it's massively used in Germany, for example. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for that, Amira. We'll definitely take St John's Wort into the Aural Apothecary Desert Island Drugs. Now then, what about a soundtrack or an anthem to your career then for the Aural Apothecary playlist?
This was very difficult. But I hope you are ready for what I'm going to tell you about now.
We're ready.
Okay, so Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze.
Okay.
1967. Right. Does it tell you anything?
It does. Given us that you told us what's your area of expertise, yes?
Yes. Yes. I heard a lot of explanation about this song in particular, and a lot of people didn't understand anything. And apparently that Jimi was explaining a psychedelic experience himself.
Okay, well, that sounds like a proper good answer for somebody who's interested.
And a good song as well.
Absolutely.
It certainly enhances the list.
Yeah, definitely. We'll take that.
But there's quite a few songs, isn't there, that I think Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is another one which is sort of supposed to be about their experience on drugs.
Yeah.
Well, I think there are loads of them from the 60s and the 70s, aren't there?
Yeah.
We'll definitely take that. And finally then, we're trying to make an Aural Apothecary library, and we're interested in a book that has influenced you and your career that you'd like to add to this Aural Apothecary library, particularly for listeners who might be starting off in their career.
So the book I'm proposing today is How to Run a Drug Cartel.
Okay.
It's a narconomic.
Narconomics.
That's edgy. That's edgy. We like that.
So it's by Tom Wainwright, and he is from The Economist. So I'm not sure. What do you think about that book?
Go on. What's it? What's the premise?
Okay.
Well, Gimmo's got to read it by next time.
Yeah.
So basically, the book is about drug cartels and how they think of drug dealing and drug making as a big business, like any other big business, and how it has a lot of aspects. So they always think about the branding, the franchising, the marketing, the diversification. And I thought I would like to tell you a little bit about this, just to tell you how this book is quite inspiring and is actually reflecting how the drug abuse scene has evolved over the years. And I will start from the song by Jimi Hendrix. Basically, as you said, rightfully said, in around 1964 to 1968, this was the psychedelic era. And then after that, I don't know if you heard of the San Francisco Summer of Love. So at that time, there were riots at the University of California, Los Angeles, and these were culminated by these songs, so Jimi Hendrix and other songs as well. A few years later, we started to see heroin come into Europe for the first time, 1971, 1972. After that, we started to see first 6 cases of AIDS in Europe, 1981, and then HIV positivity levels went so high across Europe, and they started to link sex and drugs. And that was actually kind of a massive blow for people who make drugs, because they don't want people to stop, buying drugs and using drugs. These were encouraged a lot by the songs as well. And this is where people who make drugs, so the drug cartels, they started to think, how can we make new drugs that people can take without feeling any dependence or craving? They can work Monday to Friday and then start, go to the raves on Friday night and then, be completely, under the influence of drugs Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday go to work and nothing, they are not influenced by that. In Ibiza, in around 1985, there was very famous music, the techno music, where you had the 140 to 160 beats per minute. And that actually was mimicking ecstasy at the time. It was like the top drug that was not causing a lot of addiction, not a lot of craving, and people like that. But we've seen a lot of the addiction doctors, they started to see more of tachycardic patients. So the music actually mimicked the effect of the drug. MDMA was causing a lot of tachycardia and 140, 160 beats per minute. Then drug cartels started to improve that. They wanted something similar to ecstasy, but it was very difficult to do that. And ecstasy was very psychedelic, so people like to go cozy, touchy. Anyway, so they started to produce the novel psychoactive substances, which come in colorful tablets. So they have brands like Pink Panthers, like Messi, like David Beckham. And they are not injected. They may not be very potent. But of course, that's not the situation today. The trend has, now reached a point where they are on the darknet and they are extremely potent. So I thought just to share with you that.
Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, so you mentioned a few names there. I'm just checking if we have our legal advice to check when we're mentioning some of those big names. The book itself, I'm halfway through the book actually. It's a great read, and as you say, it's very on the business side. Even drug cartels have HR departments, it turns out.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was going to say it's fascinating, isn't it? Because when you watch Narcos and that sort of thing, it's all about the crime and intimidation element. I didn't realise there was a sort of a strategy and planning department as well. It's fantastic.
They've got to look after their soft skills as well.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Shall we move on? And Gimo, are you going to take us on to the National Learning Report?
Yeah, okay. So I'm not sure how drug cartels look after their staff when things go wrong.
I think we do know that.
What we wanted to talk about, it's a recent report from the Healthcare Safety Investigations Branch, and they are an organisation that conduct independent investigations into patient safety concerns in NHS-funded care across England. This report concerns support for staff following patient safety incidents, and it's quite a long report. I sort of welcomed it and think it's fairly positive because it's starting to address and identify a long-standing issue, and that's the fact that staff who are involved in patient safety incidents, I've heard them referred to as the second victim. They're often, obviously, the patient is our primary concern, but the staff involved in those incidents are often victims themselves, and traditionally they've not been very well supported. So the report is basically saying that there's still a bit of a blame culture in the NHS, or certainly one where we seek out individuals, and it really needs to get better. And it highlights the need to take a systems approach to error instead of that idea of apportioning individual blame. Obviously, taking things like negligence and malfeasance out of the equation. So I think that's of particular relevance to pharmacy because this is something we've been talking about in pharmacy for years, is the culture of blaming individuals, particularly for dispensing errors, as opposed to looking at the systems. So it's a timely report. I don't know what you think about it, everyone.
I actually thought when I read it, wow, I could have done with this 10 years ago, to be honest, when I was part of the movement that really took on patient safety and medication safety in particular. And so whilst we were doing loads of great work about trying to get people to report, at the top, sometimes we still had people who, the way that they dealt with people were fearful of reporting. And so, yeah, I could have done with this 10 years ago. And I, like probably many people in previous jobs, have had to sit opposite family of patients who have sadly died because of error. It's a horrific situation to have to go through. But on the other side, I've had other incidents where the junior doctor, and I think they use an example in the report, literally first 2 weeks of their job, something has happened and a patient has died, and that person pretty much gave up medicine. They, no matter how hard we tried to support that person, they couldn't live with it, and it's an incredibly difficult area. So I think this report is, as you say, Paul, very timely. I do wish that the HSIB was able to be given a bit more independent teeth, and I think it is after that. Apparently they're waiting for some more legislation, because if you look at the observations rather than recommendations, it's very soft, isn't it? Or it would be beneficial if, this was endorsed within organisations. Well, it must be endorsed, and it would be useful to implement and see what are the outcomes. Well, we definitely need to do that. So I'd go a bit further, but I would say that, wouldn't I?
Yeah, I think I really like the report. It's very timely, and yeah, it's been a long-standing issue. I totally agree with that. And it made me think and reflect about the new School of Pharmacy that we are developing. And I was actually thinking, when I was trained as a pharmacist, I was terrified, like if I do a calculation, mistake, or like in a simulated environment, like I was told at some point, sorry, you killed your patient, so I can fail that question, or, and then we started to hear about critical questions. So that made me think, in training, future pharmacists, we really need to look after them, because after OSCE stations, after simulated classes, they need to have like a feedback, debriefing about what went wrong, how to cope with it, because actually sometimes they can be left traumatized, and that can affect them when they go in practice. They are not confident. In the GPHC, the new standards that were published recently, the GPHC mentioned two main words with a C, two C's. So being confident and being compassionate. I think we need the two. We need them to be confident so that they can be decision makers, so that they can be prescribers, but we also need them to be compassionate, think of the patient, put the patient at the center of their care, because that's our main role.
I'm glad you listened to the previous Aural Apothecary podcasts, Amira.
Definitely.
Indeed she did. And I mean, I highlighted the compassionate leadership part of which fits in with our discussions last time around. I just wanted to shout out, in Wales, I know our own Health Education and Improvement Wales organisation have done a lot with a company called DNA Definitive, who offer a med-trim course, and it's medical trauma and resilience management. They've worked with over 1,200 clinicians now across the UK. The conversations I've had with them about the pharmacy profession are really interesting and fascinating. And when you read the report, you're thinking perhaps of medication errors and dispensing errors, but actually the trauma that our community pharmacists sometimes see being on the high street, about seeing some of the things that happens in their businesses. When I've talked to some of the community pharmacy leaders around the UK about the trauma that community pharmacies can experience, it's another neglected area. So enjoyed the report. Let's see if we can make a difference. It's all about the implementation once again. Great, thank you for the discussion. Okay, coming up on our next episode, we'll be joined by GP Dr Lawrence Brad. Lawrence is one of STC's colleagues down on the South Coast, and his interests include education and knowledge transition. He's interested in developing the capability of the multidisciplinary team, in particular in a post-pandemic primary care. So we'll be looking forward to catching up with Lawrence next time around. STC, anything to add to that?
No, he'll be a great guest, and he's already told me he's thinking about his choices, so look forward to that.
Once we're on the subject of great guests, we've obviously started with two great guests, so thank you, Amira, for taking the time this evening. And also, it's really pleasing to hear that the guests are queuing up to come on the Aural Apothecary. And so over the next half a dozen episodes or so, I can assure you that we will continue to bring you high quality, high caliber guests to share their thought and expertise with you, the listeners. So thank you once again, Amira, for joining us. Thank you to our audience for taking the time out of busy schedules to listen in. Over to Gimmo for the final ingredient.
Okay, well, just before that, if you want to follow us on Twitter, it's at Aural Apothecary, and at Aural Apothecary Pod on Instagram, and at Aural Apothecary Pod at gmail.com. So get in touch with us via those. The final ingredient. So, do you like an afternoon nap? Well, as it turns out, a recent report says taking an afternoon snooze could keep your brain sharp. The study found that a proper nap is beneficial to the maintenance of cognitive function, and so they urged the elderly to take a proper nap in the afternoon. Nappers in the study tested statistically higher on average compared to the non-napping. So, there you have it. If you want to get ahead in life, podcasters, take a nap.
You've been listening to a 3 Apothecaries production.
The Aural Apothecary podcast. Sound and production, Jimbo Slough. Music by Jamie Brewster. And artwork by David Baker. Thanks for listening to the Aural Apothecary podcast. Warning, harmless if digested.